What's on, where, and when. It's the Talk of Nelson. NBS Talk Nelson.
At NBS, we believe in banking for life. For over 160 years, we've been a trusted banking provider for generations of locals like you. We know our clients personally and build long-term relationships with them, offering flexibility by giving our staff freedom to make quick decisions to put them first. Experience banking for life with NBS.
Welcome to Football Focus. I'm Chris Butler, and this week we have a very special guest for you. Many of you will know him as an ex-English Championship and Premier League player, a former Phoenix and Tasman United player, and also now the coach of Wellington Olympic. We have Paul Ifill on the show for you, so stay tuned. But before we dive in, a big shout out to our venue sponsor, the Turf Hotel, Main Road, Stoke. Check out their Facebook page for everything that's on this weekend. And also shout out to Mark Sheehan and the team at Sheehan Financial, our local football update sponsor. We'd also want to congratulate FC Nelson, who took a crucial 3-2 win in their first leg of the Southern League playoffs. It was against Waimakariri. The return leg is this Saturday at Guppy Park. 2 p.m. kickoff, so make sure you get down and support the team. If they win this game, they get to go back down to Christchurch to take on Wanaka, and the winner of that game then gets entry into the Southern League. So we wish FC Nelson all the best of luck. Today, I'm joined by Ryan Skippy Stewart and Neil Connell, and we kick things off by congratulating Paul on Wellington Olympic's recent Chatham Cup win against Auckland City.
It's something that I'm very proud of. Obviously, the boys have done the work. It's kind of just we, as a staff, we just have to find a way to steer it. I think when you go into a club like Olympic, who've just won the National League, the expectations are very high. So we knew going in after replacing Rupert, who'd done a fantastic job, it was going to be difficult. And I suppose I look back to the start of the season and the first thing we did, we won the Charity Cup against our old team Christchurch, and then we go into the O-League playoff against Auckland, and you lose those games, and you're straight away out of the O-League. We bounced back a week later against Napier up there, which was a great result, and then we lose at home against Western Suburbs. And I remember thinking, blimey, I've been here sort of 8 weeks, and the trophies seem to be flying out the cabinet, not into the cabinet. We're losing games in the Central League, which they're not used to, and come under a bit of pressure, to be fair, but the boys reacted really well. And I remember speaking on the pitch after the game saying, look, you've got a target on your back now. You're the national champions. Everybody wants to beat you. And I did feel that it would be a real defining moment of the season if we could bounce back from that. And fast forward, I think we're leading into the Chatham Cup final. We won 21 games in a row, which I've never been involved in any team at any level, even as a kid that did that sort of thing. So that was crazy. And you go into the Chatham Cup final and we felt pretty invincible. And obviously, I would have liked to have finished it in normal time, but I have a habit of letting in goals after the 90th minute and then 10 Chatham Cup finals to make it interesting. And obviously, 2 years in a row to win it on penalties is something pretty crazy. I definitely, if we ever get back there, I want to win it in normal time because it's no good for the heart.
That's right. So what happens now? So you go into the National League, and what happens with the O-League? So can you give us, because we're used to Auckland City being pretty much the dominant force, but you've taken that mantle. So what happens now?
Yeah, so we've got to basically win the National League to qualify for next year's O-League. So Auckland City took out this year's O-League. They go off to the Intercontinental Championship. I actually think they flew out today or yesterday. So they've got a game against, don't quote me on this, but I think Al Ain to see if they get through to the next stage, which means that this year's National League is the qualifier for next year's O-League. So make the grand final, so you've got to finish in the top two, and then you've got to probably knock off Auckland City, as they generally seem to be the ones to beat. But I do think this is just my opinion, but I think this is the strongest national league in the new format. I think if you look at the last couple of years, I don't want to be disrespectful, but there's a couple of teams that have kind of snuck in there and then sort of realised that the gap between the regional leagues and the national league. Whereas I look at it this year and I'm like, oh, who are the weaker teams? I think it's a really good league this year, so it's going to be difficult.
Let's talk a little bit about your background. And, the internet's always right, so correct me if I'm wrong. Born in Brighton?
Yeah, correct.
Is that correct?
Yep.
But can you tell us a little bit about the football pathway you had in Auckland and, how you ended up playing for some clubs such as Watford, and we've got Saltdean here, Sheffield, Crystal Palace. So, how did it start from you, and how did you sort of get on the radar to start getting picked up with one or two of those clubs?
Yeah, Saltdean was my first club, really. I joined there, I think as a 16-year-old, to play kind of under 19s football. My father had played for Saltdean and had a good record as a forward there. So it was only natural going and watch his games that I sort of had an affinity to Saltdean. I think as a 16-year-old, I started scoring goals in the first team, firstly in the 19s, then in the reserves, and then into the first team. And I always remember because my dad had played there and the coach knew my dad. There was an injury crisis in the first team, and I've been scoring goals in the reserves and the youth team. And the coach rang my dad and said, my dad's name's Everton. He said, Everton, we're thinking of bringing Paul into the first team for this game in the midweek. Do you think he's ready? And my dad said no. He said, I don't think he's ready. So, and I didn't know any of this. I come into training, and the coach grabbed me and said, I spoke to your dad, and he said, look, he's not happy for you to play. He doesn't think you're ready. And I said, well, I'm 16 years old. Why are you speaking to my father? I said, I'm training with the men's team. Speak to me. Got home, and my dad at the time was the karate champion of England, so I had to choose my words wisely.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but I told him in no uncertain terms not to mess around with my football, because as much as I respected his opinion, I thought I was ready. So he said, look, if you think you're ready, go and speak to the coach and you can play. And spoke to the coach. Coach said, yeah, cool, all right, we'll play you. We won 2-0. I scored. The coach rang my dad, said, look, I think he's ready. We're going to start him on Saturday. I duly went and scored on Saturday. And that was it. That was my time done kind of in the youth team. Moved up to the first team, and I was scoring a lot of goals at that level. And because I was so young, a few clubs started sort of coming to the games and having a look. And I ended up getting 3 trial opportunities. It was, let me get this right, Portsmouth, Newcastle and Millwall. Before that, I'd been on a couple of trials through a guy who worked for Saltdean called Dennis Burnett. Used to play for Millwall, used to play for West Ham. So he sent me on trial at West Ham. I had a fantastic trial at West Ham, scored a hat-trick in my first game, scored another one in the second game. And it's quite a cool story. In the second game, I got one of the best goals of my career, actually picked up the ball in my own half, beat about 4 or 5 men, touched it in the corner, and all the West Ham first team had come over after finishing their training session and were watching the game. Knew that I was a trialist, started singing. The whole first team started singing, sign him up, sign him up, sign him up. So I came off the pitch and I thought I'd nailed it. And the chief executive and the chief scout came over and said, oh, look, we're really sorry, but we're not going to sign you. And I remember thinking, what more can I do in a trial? And I go to schools and I do corporate talks on this, and I actually show the list of players, because they said I wasn't any better than what they had. And the list of players in that youth team that day, it was like Rio Ferdinand, it was Joe Cole, it was Frank Lampard, it was Michael Carrick. So they were absolutely right in what they said. I wasn't any better than what they had. But as a sort of 15, 16-year-old kid, you feel like you've done enough 4 goals in 2 games, and the first team singing to sign you up. So fast forward a year, I had these trials at the 3 clubs I mentioned, went down to Portsmouth, and this was before the days of mobile phones. Drove down to Portsmouth, which was quite a long way, and get down there, walk in, there's no one around. Managed to grab the groundsman, say, I'm down here for a trial. He said, oh, there's no one let you know, son, the game's off this waterlog pitch. So that was my first trial, done and dusted, never went back to Portsmouth. Went up to Millwall, and my parents literally couldn't afford to get me to Millwall. They couldn't afford the train fare, couldn't afford the petrol. And one of the money men at Saltdean actually said, look, I'll drive you up there. So we get up to the ground, and I'm like, I've not eaten, I've not had any breakfast. And he said, you're just about to trial and you've not eaten. I said, no. So we drove to a petrol station. He said, what do you want? I said, get me a Coke and a Mars bar. So my pre-match meal for probably the biggest trial of my life was a Coke and a Mars bar. Anyway, went into the training ground. I had no idea who we were playing. Turns out we're playing Crystal Palace, so it's a Derby Day rival game in the reserves. I look at the team list, and they've got Bruce Dyer in the team. Bruce Dyer had just become the first ever £1 million teenager. Their team was littered with players who played at the top level, playing in the reserves, and I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm so far out of my depth. So I went out and played, and I was absolutely woeful. Ran around, got knocked over. I was not strong enough. I just wasn't ready. And with about a minute to go, the big centre back plays the ball back from the halfway line to the goalkeeper, but he slips as he plays it, and that's it. I'm in from the halfway line. So I'm running through. This is my moment to show them what I can do. I know I can score goals. So, but when you run through from the halfway line, as Skip and Neil say, you've got a million things going through your head. And I'm going right. I'm gonna chip it. No. I'm gonna go round him. And honestly, I just overthought everything. And as I got there, sort of to the edge of the box, I thought, nah, forget all that. I'm just gonna whack it. And as I went to hit it, it took the tiniest little bobble, and I completely missed the ball. Sort of span around, landed on the turf. There's grass on my face, dirt in my teeth. And I'm like, oh, swallowed. I just wanted the ground to swallow me up. And anyway, went in, got changed, went up to the players' lounge, and by this point, unbeknownst to me, my father had made the trip up. And as I said, he was a karate champion of England. He's not a huggy guy at all. But as I walked into the players' lounge, he just put his arms out, gave me a big hug, and it was a sort of hug to say, "Oh, you messed that one up, son." So again, chief exec and the chief scout come over to me and said, "How do you think you did?" And I said, "Look, I'm so sorry to waste your time. I was so far out of my depth, blah blah blah." And they said, "Oh, look, we'd like to offer you a year as a scholar." And I said, "I don't understand. Why would you try and sign me on the back of what you've just seen out there?" And they said, "Oh, look, we knew, we've been following you for weeks. We've been watching your games, watching your training, blah blah blah. Said we knew you weren't ready for this, but we were actually looking to see what your attitude was like." And they said, "You did not stop running for 90 minutes. Every time you got knocked down, you got yourself back up, didn't moan about anything. You gave the ball away, you tried to win it back." So they said, we can help you with the rest. We just wanted to make sure that you had the almost the minerals to keep going in a situation that was too tough for you at this time. And the only sort of fly in the ointment was I've always been a Newcastle fan. So I've been off for the year, but on the way home with my dad, I'm going, Dad, I want to go to the trial with Newcastle. I want to play for Newcastle. And he's like, "Son, you've just been offered a contract. What have you always wanted to be?" And I'm like, "Well, a professional." And he said, "Well, take what's on the table. You don't know what's going to happen at Newcastle. You might go up there, they might not like you. You might have a trial as bad as you did today, and they won't offer you a contract. Take what's at hand." And by the next morning, I'd realised that it was right, and we agreed and duly signed it and had a good year in the youth team and got offered a contract at the end of the season. And kind of the rest is history, really.
Yeah, tell us about. So there are some other teams here: Watford, Sheffield, Crystal Palace. So were those clubs slightly later on?
No, Watford was before. Watford, I went to.
Oh, okay.
As about maybe a 14-year-old. So I'll go back. So I was in the Brighton and Hove Albion School of Excellence.
Well, I was going to ask about that. How did Brighton miss you?
Well, yeah, so they had me. Yeah, they had me for a time. About 14 years old, I was there. Maybe right. For about 8 to 10 months, I was there with a couple of my friends, and we'd go along on a Monday to the School of Excellence, and the training was all good, and I thought I was doing well. And there was a training session, and the coach called me son, and I was never one to say much, but on this particular night, I was in a bad mood, and I said, "I'm not your son." And he said, No, I just call everybody that. And I went, No, you called me son because you don't know my name. I said, "I've been here eight whatever it is, 8 or 9 months, and you don't know my name." I said, "Why am I wasting my time and my parents' money for this?" And he said, "Stop being so this and that and blah blah blah." And I remember going home in the car, and I said to my dad, I said, "There's no point us being here. We're wasting your petrol money, wasting our time." And my two mates felt exactly the same because they were in the same boat, and we all agreed that we were done. So anyway, I went back to playing local football. The other lad that was in the car that day became a golf pro, and the other lad that was in the car that day became a rugby pro. Yeah, ridiculous. So we chose the right path. Brighton missed out on all three of us. And then I went to Watford after that. Watford had scouted me from a local game. I had a really, really good time at Watford. The chief scout had come and scouted me, and they duly offered me a contract. And I used to go up there sort of once every couple of weeks. Really, really enjoyed it. And then I think that that season I scored 11 goals in 9 games, and again, sort of going really well. And it was the director of youth football, and it was just becoming a thing in football. Before that, it was head coach, assistant coach. That was it. There wasn't any director, especially of youth football. And he came in and he watched me in one game, and he said, I don't think you're ever going to be a pro, so we're going to release you. And that was that. So again, off back to local football, signed for Saltdean, like I said, and then ended up getting in later on. And as it happens, and you can check this, the numbers are out there. I think I scored more goals against Watford than any other club in my career.
That's right.
There you go. Excellent.
Things go around in circles. Then some time with Sheffield and then Crystal Palace.
Yeah, so spent I think 6-7 years at Millwall. Had a really good time there.
Yeah,
a couple of promotions. One league win. I think it was League One. Going up to the Championship, we had a couple of times in the playoffs. In the Championship to go to the Premier League, didn't quite make it, and then an FA Cup final, which was fantastic. And then again, same thing. I had a real weird habit of scoring against certain teams. So if you look at my record, it was Watford, it was Colchester, it was Sheffield United, and it was Central Coast Mariners. And I'll come back to why Central Coast Mariners in a bit. But I always seem to do really well against Sheffield United. And after one of the particular games, I'd scored again. I think we got beat, but I'd scored again. And Neil Warnock pulled me after the game and just said, listen, I'm going to come in for you at the end of the season. And I didn't really think too much of it, to be honest. And end of the season came and I wasn't thinking of moving because I absolutely loved Millwall. And the club came to me and said, look, we actually need the money. And we've had a bid come in. I think it was about £750,000 with a fee of £250,000 if we got promoted, if Sheffield United got promoted to the Premier League. Taking it to £1 million, and that was it. I had no choice but to go because it was the only offer that was in, and the club wanted me to go. So off I went to Sheffield and spent 18 months there. We got promoted in the first season to the Premier League, so I made my Premier League debut against Liverpool, which was an amazing day. Ultimately, looking back, I don't think I was mentally ready for the Premier League. I don't think I was. I didn't understand the level, and I probably wasn't professional enough, and just wasn't ready for the Premier League really. And because of that, I quickly found myself leaving and going to Palace, back in the Championship. And I thought, Palace will get back up to the Premier League, I'll be fine. And I never played in the Premier League again. So there's some learning there, that's for sure.
So I was just going to say, tell us about the difference, between Championship and Premiership. So what is the difference? Because, the Championship seems like a very competitive, and they say at times it's an even harder league because you've got to play a lot more games. But tell us about that step up to Premiership.
Yeah, look, I'd gone from League One to the Championship and barely seen a difference. And I was a decent Championship player. I was always scoring goals and assisting goals in the Championship and felt comfortable there. And then you fast forward to the Premier League, and I remember making my debut, like I said, against Liverpool, and I'm playing against John Arnorisa. And John Arnorisa is a decent player, but I didn't think he was the best player in the Premier League. And I remember thinking, I'll be too quick for John. And I remember getting the ball.
Story, yeah.
I remember getting the ball out of my feet on the right hand side, and I thought, right, I'm just going to push this, and I'm going to run him and show him how quick I am, nice and early. And I pushed it sort of 25 yards out my feet. And it's a race between me and John, and I'm going, and then I'm like, oh shit, he's still with me here. And I'm like, right, I'm going to go absolute top speed. So the legs are up, technique, everything. And I look at him, he's barely breathing, he's jogging. And I'm like, oh shit. And he puts a big arm across me, takes the ball like I'm a little kid and just runs off. And I'm like, oh God, I'm in a bit of trouble here. And then later on in the game, he actually pushes the ball past me. And about 25, and he's running. I'm like, oh shit, I'm not going to catch him here. So I go full tilt to catch him, and he gets the cross in first, and I've slid in, and I've actually ended up hitting him as he's crossed it, and he had to be stretchered off, but he was out for bloody 6 to 8 weeks. And I didn't try to do him. That's just not how I am. But it's just because I couldn't catch him, and I felt like I had to go because Neil Warnock would have absolutely ripped me a new one if I hadn't got close to him. So that was the difference, really. I think you go up and everything just moves a little bit quicker. Their decisions are quicker than yours. You're not used to it. Their touch is never. They've never not thought about where their touch is going to be. So, they're taking a touch to play the next pass, whereas I'm taking a touch in the Championship, then I can take another touch, then I can make my pass. So it's just, things just speed up. And if you're not ready for that and you're not training at that level, you get found out pretty quickly. And that was the problem. I was too much of a luxury player to play every week. So he was bringing me off the bench, and then eventually he left me out the squad altogether. And that was when I decided it was time to move.
Just before you jump on to the next bit, I just want to flick back to the Millwall, and you'll be forever thankful that we needed in Portsmouth, because they would have snapped you up. And you went on to Millwall and become an absolute legend. And I believe they still got that picture of you up in the hallway there. And you obviously had some fantastic times in the FA Cup final, one of the highlights. Can you tell us some stories about that and players that you were up against there? And also, you've told me a few good stories in the time, but some that can't be told on here and some we can. But there's a good story about the shirt swap. That would be a good one.
Yeah, no worries. So obviously, you get to play in the FA Cup final. The semi-final was the big game for us, because we're watching the draw, and in the draw for the semi was Man U, Arsenal, Sunderland and us. Sunderland were in our league, and obviously you want to avoid Arsenal. Were unbelievable at the time, as were Man U. So I would imagine if you could have, they'd be able to do it today, but you'd have panned to the changing rooms of both Sunderland and us when we were drawn against each other. It would have been like delirium. So we thought we could turn them over. They thought they could turn us. I think we were 4th and 5th maybe at the time of the draw in the Championship. I think we'd beaten them in the league game, and a win and a draw. So we kind of half-fancied ourselves anyway. So we managed to beat them in the semi, and you go through the final, but you know that you're going to be playing one of the best teams in the world. Manchester United obviously beat Arsenal, and then you look at their team, and it's like Ruud van Nistelrooy, Ryan Giggs, God, who else was playing there? Paul Scholes. This is the thing. So Ronaldo wasn't really on the list, if you know what I mean, because he was a kid. So we didn't really like. Yeah, I've been watching Roy Keane and Van Nistelrooy and Scholes, and they were the names. They were the guys you wanted to swap shirts with. And then there's a couple of stories there I'll tell. And the first was when we were doing the prep, we were trying to keep the score to 0-0 at half time, and then go out second half and have a right go. And if we got walloped, by 5 in the second half, so what? But we wanted to try and keep it tight to half time. And we were saying set pieces are going to be a big thing, for and against, and here's who you mark and blah, blah, blah. And Dennis Wise was the gaffer, and he said to me, you're going to pick up the young Portuguese fella. So I'm like, yep, no worries. He's only a young lad, probably not the best in the air. And I was decent in the air. I was a big lad. So anyway, it gets to 44 minutes. It's 0-0. Everything's going according to plan. Corner, I'm picking up. That was under now with Ronaldo. Ball gets swung in. Nothing happens. Goes back out the other side. I'm thinking, I'll tell you what, if we nick this, I might be able to nick one on the counter here, and we go in 1-0. Now, in hindsight, being now understanding as a coach, what I did was an absolute coach-killing moment, but I decided I'd go. Ball gets swung back in, and there's if you can get this up on film, there's a really, really cool moment, probably not for me, but really cool moment where Gary Neville swings the ball back in, and you can see Ronaldo running into the box, and you just see me behind Ronaldo, and there's that moment of realization that, oh my God, that's my man. And it's going straight towards him. And I'm thinking, please no. And he just rises like he does, and he goes bang, heads it down into the floor, up, goal, 1-0. So we go in at half time. And because Wise is a player coach, he's probably forgotten who I'd been told to mark. So Wisey and Neil Harris, who was our centre forward, were closest to Ronaldo when he scored. So they're having a massive row about who was supposed to pick him up. I'm just sat in the corner, just thinking, please don't realise it was me. So anyway, we go out in the second half, and they scored 2 goals. One was a pen that, in this day and age, would have been actually not given due to VAR. They'd have overturned it, and the other one was offside that Van Nistelrooy scored. So he scored a double in the second half, and yeah, like I said, it probably should have finished 1-0. We didn't have too many chances, but we didn't expect to. So anyway, with about 2-3 minutes to go, ball breaks in midfield. It's probably a 90-10 in my favour with me and Roy Keane. But because I see out the corner of my eye that it's Roy Keane, I slow down, and by the time I get there, it's probably a 50-50. So it's my own fault there because I shit it a little bit. And then anyway, we go in for a tackle together, and we actually hurt each other. Neither of us done each other. It was like a fair one. Ball pops out, but we hurt each other. So we both get treatments, and then we're both on the side of the pitch. And I thought, this is my opportunity here, because at the time I think Roy was playing his 5th FA Cup final, so it was a record. So everybody wanted Keane's. So I just went, Roy, any chance I can have your shirt afterwards? And he said, yeah, you've done all right today, son. He said, I'll tell you what, I'll see you after in the tunnel, and you can have my shirt. So I'm like, oh, happy days. Yeah, the game finishes. They're doing all their bits and pieces. They get their medals. We get our medals. We go back in the changing room. I'm sorry, I walked back towards the changing room, and at this point, I've completely forgotten about it because I'm thinking, you're never going to get it. In the tunnel is Roy Keane with his shirt off. Now, I'm like, oh my God, he's waiting for me. So I walk over and he goes, there you go, son. And it's like, what do I do? Because there's no way Roy Keane wants my shirt. Like, absolutely no way. But I kind of have to offer it because I don't want to look, like that guy either. So I kind of just, without saying anything, sort of do this. And he goes, no, you're all right. so anyway, I walk back into the changes and I've got Roy Keane's shirt sort of, tucked in the back of my shorts. And I sit down next to my mate Dave Livermore, and he looks absolutely devoted. And I said, "What's wrong with you?" Because I thought he was pissed off that we'd lost. And I said, "It was pretty obvious that today was going to be tough." He said, "Oh no," he said, "Early on in the game, I spoke to Roy Keane, and he said he'd give me his shirt."
Oh, you're kidding me!
I'm like, oh geez. I said, "Whose did you get?" And he said, "Oh, I got another one." He said, "But it's not Roy Keane, is it? Everybody wanted Keane." I said, "Oh." So I'm sat there for a couple of minutes. I'm like, most people I'd never do this, but I really like Dave. He's a great lad, like real honest guy. And I said, "Look, I got Keane's." I said, let's toss a coin, and the winner gets Keane's. And we tossed a coin, and I gave both my cup final shirt and the cup final shirt that I got from Dave to my mother, and she got them put in a frame. So in my mother's house, there's Ifill Butt, Nicky Butt.
You got Nicky Butt.
Nicky Butt shirt. Yeah.
Well, that's not bad. That's not a bad shirt, is it?
Oh, look, it's not bad. And he went on. He actually went on to play for Newcastle.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. So it wasn't the worst, and beggars can't be choosers. So I'm happy enough. But it would have been nice to get Keane's. I actually did get Keane's a few years later, actually, from a friend. So I did end up with a Manchester United Roy Keane shirt. It just wasn't the cup final one.
Yeah. So just going on to that, Paul, and just fast forwarding, and some people probably know, some people aren't aware, but how did you end up in New Zealand?
So look, quite a long story. I'll cut a little bit short, but I'd finished my time at Palace or nearly finished my time, and they offered me a new deal on a pay cut actually, and I just couldn't get fit at Palace. I never had a very good time, and it was nothing they were doing or anything like that. I just couldn't back up playing Saturday, Tuesday, and trying to play 50 games a season. I was 29 years old, and I thought, no, I need to go somewhere where they just play week to week, Saturday. So I wanted to go to the MLS, but trying to get into the MLS at that time was really difficult. Didn't really know anybody. And again, I was in the gym rehabbing from another hamstring injury, I think. And Nick Carl, who was from Australia and had played with me at Palace, said, "Would you be keen to play in the Australian League?" And I was like, "Oh, I'd never really thought about it." He said, "Oh, look, I can put you onto my agent and we can just see what comes of it." So he put me onto his agent. Agent rings me and said, "Look, there's a club over here that would love to take you." And I said, "Oh yeah, who's that?" And he said, "Oh, Central Coast Mariners." So I said, "Oh, okay, tell me a bit more." He said, "Oh, look, it's a couple of hours from Sydney, really nice spot." He sent me pictures of the ground, and if you haven't seen the ground is unbelievable.
Yeah,
it's right on the beach. There's palm trees, you can literally see the sea. So I showed my wife and my girl. She was my girlfriend at the time, and she's like, "Let's go." So spoke to the family, told everybody that we're leaving, had a party to go away, everything. It was all done. Agreed the deal. Hadn't signed the deal. The day I was supposed to sign the deal, my agent rings me. Says, "Oh, I hate to tell you this, but the deal's off." I said, "What do you mean the deal's off?" I said, "I've said goodbye to my family. We're going. I've got to go." And he said, "No, look, the deal's off." He said, I said, "Well, can you investigate what's going on?" So he rings back a couple of hours later. He said, "Oh, look, as it happens, Central Coast are part owned by Sheffield United, and somebody at Sheffield United has said, don't take him. Oh. He's in phone, and he's liable to call it a day early and return home. Like, don't really trust him." So that was it. The deal was done. So I'm now like, oh my God. So I had to sort out, carrying on the rent in my place. I had to tell everybody that I was staying, and then I had to find a club. So at this point, I got rid of my agent in England, thinking that I didn't need him anymore. So now I'm ringing around clubs, and I rang my mate Neil Harris, who was still playing at Millwall. I said, "Look, can you speak to your gaffer and I'll just come in and train?" So he said, "Yep." So I went into Millwall, trained, and it was one of them. My first training session, everything I touched turned to gold. I was ridiculous. One of the best training sessions of my life. And Kenny Jackett pulls me in the office after, and he said, "Look, would you be keen to play here?" And I said, "Well, look, because we're in the league below the champ." And I said, "Look, I wouldn't normally drop down, but I'd love to play for Millwall again for sure." And he said, "All right, well, look, I'm going to get a deal together overnight, and let's get it done tomorrow." So I went home and told my wife, I said, "Look, it looks like we haven't got to move, because the training grounds for Millwall and Palace are like a stone's throw away." So happy, rang my mum, she was buzzing. Go in next day, train the house down again. So I had 2 great training sessions. Then Kenny pulls me after training the second day and goes, "Oh, look, we've had a look at it and we don't think we can afford you." And I said, "Well, we have spoken money. So how do you know?" I said, "If you offer me something, we can negotiate." I said, "I'm happy to take a pay cut to stay here at this club." And he said, "Oh, look, I just don't think it's going to happen." So kind of got me the door. And I remember going down to the change room and there was Neil Harris and Adam Boulder, who were like the club captain and the vice captain. And they said, "What did Jacket say?" Well, like, we've told him that we've got to sign you. And I said, "No, he's letting me go, so he can't afford me." So those two went straight up to the gaffer's office to have an argument with him and sort of back me. And they come back down and said, "No, he's not budging. He thinks you're too expensive." I said, "But we haven't spoken money." So anyway, a couple of days later, it was in the paper that Ifill prices himself out of a move back. So now the fans are absolutely hammering me. And I'm like, hold on a minute. So I actually rang the South London press guy that I knew. And I said, "Look, I'd like to say my bit here." So I went in the paper and said, it was actually a load of rubbish. So that all was all kicking off in the background. At the same time, Brighton, where I was from, had invited me in for a trial. So I went down to Brighton and got there, trained, did quite well in the training. And they said, "I would like to offer you a deal." So they offered me a deal. And they just signed a centre forward called Liam Dickinson. Now, I knew Liam's agent, and Liam's agent told me what he'd just been offered, and they'd offered him £4,500 a week, and they're offering me £2,500 a week. Now, Liam had never played in the Championship. I'd played 200 odd games in the Championship, and I'm like, hold on a minute, you offer me nearly half of what he's on. So I went, "No, I'm not having it." So they said, "Well, tell you what, we've got a game tomorrow night against I think it was AFC Wimbledon, who at that point weren't even in the league, so it's playing a non-league set." They said, "If you do well in that, we'll up your money." So I went, "So you don't think I'm good enough, but you think if I can do well enough against a non-league side, you're going to give me more money. Tell me how that makes any sense." So anyway, we're going back and forth. And then the agent from Australia gets hold of me that evening and said, "Look, we've got another club coming for you called the Wellington Phoenix." I said, "Where's Wellington?" And he said, "Oh, it's in New Zealand." So I look on the map and I'm like, "Oh, close enough to Australia. It'll probably be just a pot, probably be palm trees." So I said, "Look, let's have a go." So I looked at the contract. The contract wasn't as good, but I thought, "Oh, look." At this point, I was just pissed off with football in England. So anyway, I said to him, "Look, I'll agree to the deal, but," I said, "please do not release this until I can speak to Brighton and let them know I'm not coming." So the next morning comes, I'm driving down to Brighton. I was going to train. I was going to pull the gaffer afterwards and say, "Look, I'm not signing. I'm actually going to New Zealand." Then, as I'm getting close to the training ground, I'm about 20 minutes away, my phone people are ringing, messages buzzing through. I'm thinking, what's going on? Something's happened. So I pull over, ring my wife, and I go, "What's going on? Everybody's ringing. What's going on?" She's like, "It's all over Sky News. You're on the ticker tape at the bottom that you've signed for Wellington Phoenix in New Zealand." And I'm like, "Oh, shit." So I ring. I think it was Russell Slade was the gaffer. So I'm like, "Oh my God, this is so awkward. I don't really want to ring him and say I've done this." So, and this is terrible. I actually can't believe I did this, but this is terrible. So I sat by the side of the road and I waited till I knew they'd have started training so that I could leave him a voicemail.
Oh.
Yeah, awful. I hate it. It's horrible thinking about it now, but I rang, "So sorry, I've signed a deal in New Zealand. It's just happened. It's just come through. Apparently it's on Sky Sports, so I wanted to let you know first," which was, waffle. Anyway, so I agreed the deal and that was it. I was off to New Zealand and it was exactly what I was expecting in terms of the football week to week. I think I played 27 games. I played every single game that season. The fact that I didn't have to back up and play in the midweek absolutely saved me of any injuries. Great teammates, good team. Nothing was expected of us at all. We were actually supposed to finish last.
Saying like the A-League is sort of, over the last 5-6 years, it's gone up at times in standard and then sometimes it's plateau. It's sort of got worse and got better again. Just where do you see it now when you first came and played in it? Because I know early on in the A-League we got the likes of Dwight York, Del Piero came over the stage and we were signing high caliber players, and for a few seasons we haven't had those players in the league. So where do you think it's at the moment until where it was when you first came out?
I think it's a better breeding ground for New Zealand youngsters, for sure. I think we have to kind of champion the Aussie players as well, the young Aussie players, because we don't have the so-called old, big name pros coming out. It's a real tough one because I think if you look at the history of the league, the big names don't always hit the mark. I actually think if you did a top 10 of the best Foreigners, I think they would have been guys that you maybe didn't know. You look at Thomas Boyce. I think he was unbelievable. Besart Berisha. Who have we got here now? Who's the Uruguayan up front for who used to play for Victory? Oh God, he's still playing now.
Fornaroli.
Oh, Fornaroli, yeah, like people like that, guys that you probably didn't know, but they've been really special in the A-League, and I think they're the ones that kind of stand the test of time, and actually bring on the younger ones. And I don't mean this to be disrespectful, but the likes of Del Piero, yes, it would have been good for Sydney for a couple of years, getting bums on seats.
Yeah.
But there's no kind of legacy. Whereas you look at like a Thomas Boyce, how many players coming through at Brisbane Roar would have had the opportunity to play with him and learn from him? And, you know, he was there for a number of years. Besart Berisha the same. Fornaroli's been to a number of different clubs and done the same thing. So you've almost got to go for guys that I think play at the sort of championship level back in England or thereabouts around Europe.
Yeah.
And be looking at guys mid to late 20s that have still got a bit to prove. I look at the Phoenix and Oscar Zavada. If you look at his record before he came to the A-League, it was terrible. But God, blimey, did he make a massive impact over here?
Yeah.
And every club would have been looking to sign him.
And that's the thing. He's still trying to keep his career going and not coming over at the end. So yeah, it makes a lot of sense where you go for that sort of late 20s with someone that maybe not doing it in Europe at the moment, but could come here and make a name for themselves and then go back. Yeah.
Must touch on Tasman United because you spent some time in our region. So can you tell us a little bit about that experience? How did that come about? And how'd you get on with these guys?
No, pretty good. I mean, I knew Skip and Neil from before that. I suppose I'd go back to how I met Skip. Actually, that's quite a funny story in itself. So, Skippy, as he does, talks to everybody. You know, he's the life and soul of the party, and he reached out on Facebook. Actually, didn't know him really, and he reached out and said, "Would I come down and do some after dinner speaking at the end of season awards for Suburbs?" Now, at this point, I'd never done any kind of after dinner speaking. It was something that I would never think I'd ever be able to do because it scared the shit out of me, being brutally honest. And he said, "Oh, we'll just do like a Q&A and make it work." So came down, did the Q&A class, had a good night out actually with them afterwards. And he said, let's do this again. And we duly did it again. And he got Jason Byrne to interview me. And I think it was Norm Hewitt. Was it Skip? Was that the next one? Yeah.
That was with the Falcons. Yeah.
That's with the Falcons. And came down again and we had another great night out. And he said to me, there's some really good kids in this region, but they just don't really get looked after. You know, if we could set something up and I think we could, you know, produce some guys that could go on and do something in the game, guys and girls. And I said, look. But the thing was, I was a little guarded because I hear this whenever I went to do these things. Everybody says the same shit. You know, our region's this, our region's that. Got great players here. Do you want to set something up? And I was mindful that I didn't want to put my name to something and not be involved. So I said, look, I can't do it at the moment because I'm still playing. I said, but when I retire, let's talk again, and we'll see if we can sort something out. So I fast forward to the day that I got injured. I ruptured my Achilles, and I was pretty much done. And Skip gave me about 24 hours before he was on the phone. Right, now that you're retiring, I hadn't even announced my retirement, by the way. He said, now that you're done, can we set this academy up? And I'm like, Jesus, give me 5 minutes, Skip, to see if I can actually do some rehab and get myself back right. And then we talk. But what I liked immediately with him was that he was passionate, and I knew that he just wanted to make it work. And I didn't see it as a slight. I saw it as, you know, this guy's going to make this work one way or the other. I want to get on board with somebody who's willing to do that. And obviously through that, I'd met Neil as well, and he said, Neil, be on board. And I just thought, right, with a couple of guys that are willing to, you know, put their money where their mouth is, so to speak, and do the coaching. And it's not just me putting my name to something. Let's go. And then we started having meetings. I'd come down. We were looking for people to, you know, try and sponsor, and we were looking for trust funding and all sorts of this. And then, unbeknownst to us, we made a little bit of a mistake when we called it an elite academy, so we couldn't get any funding hardly, and that made things really, really difficult. But again, same thing. We just found a way, and we just started with really basic stuff at the start, didn't we? We just said we want people to look at a player from our academy and know that they've been in our academy. And I think that happened pretty quickly. Within a couple of years, you heard people around town going, "Oh, you can tell he's been in FIFA. Oh, you can tell she's been in FIFA. They're technically really sound." So that was kind of the basis. We wanted to make sure that our players could do all the basics really well. And then, at that stage, the next coach could take them on and teach them tactically and get all those bits and pieces that we weren't quite doing. We were just getting them sort of ready so that at 15, 16, 17, they could go on and hopefully have a career. And we produced a couple of professionals, and we produced a couple of guys and girls that have played at World Cups and played international football. And so I had a relationship with these guys already. And then Skip, as he does, he's got fingers in pies everywhere. He called me one day and said, "It looks like there's going to be a franchise here in Nelson." And I always said to him that I'd like to play in Nelson, live in Nelson. And he tried to sign me for suburbs every year till about last year, actually. So I think he realised I was too old last year. So that was my last chance.
Still can, mate, if you want. It's still
Yeah.
still available.
Still an opening.
Rolling subs. I need rolling subs these days, mate. So when the idea of Tasman was floated, it was like, yeah, look, I'd be in. I'd been at Hawke's Bay under Brett Angel and learned a lot there as assistant coach. But I still wanted to play. I didn't see myself fully coaching. I wanted to play. And Clive Beaumont reached out to me, who was the general manager then, Skip? Was that right?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, Nelson-based football. Yeah.
Yeah, and he reached out to me and said, "Would you be keen?" I said, "Yeah." Look, the thought of being involved in something fresh and new and starting a new club is pretty cool. They said, "Look, we've got a young coach." I met up with Rich, and he kind of talked me into it. And the fact that I knew that I'd be going in and playing with Skip and a few others that I knew from my time down there, I thought, this could be pretty exciting. And then out of the blue, a really good friend of mine, Cam Lindsay, called as well and said he'd be keen to come in. And that took a little bit of convincing because at the time his reputation wasn't too good, and the club were really reluctant. But we managed to get him in, and he was a class leader as well for us as well. So we just moulded a really nice squad together, and we were sort of no real superstars, so to speak, but I think we batted way above our average, and we did a few things that first couple of seasons, and it was a lot of fun.
You morphed into a coaching role because you did like don't know if it was a co-coaching or an assistant role with Davor into Tasman United, and that kind of led now, I guess, you thinking about coaching. So, and I'm not too sure what you did after Tasman United, but you took on Christchurch United, had some great success there, and then Wellington Olympics. So was that the time that you started thinking I could do some coaching there, or had you always thought about that?
No, I not really. I just wanted to play. I think because the pro career had been taken away from me earlier than I was ready to let it go, I felt like I'd missed out. And I think I had a really, really bad time at Team Wellington. I went there and played 10 games after I'd retired from professional football, and I was woeful. Like, honestly, I was awful. And I remember somebody putting a thing in the paper saying I'd been the worst sign of the season, and then Team Wellington didn't want to sign me back, said I was finished and I was done. And so by the time I came down to Tasman, coaching was far from my mind, because I was like, right, I want to show people that I can still play at this level. And I think my record at Tasman, I think I scored 20 in 25 games at 37, 38 years old. And that was kind of, once I had that season, I felt like I'd shown a few people that I could still do it. And then I started thinking, well, now was maybe the time to start coaching. I'd worked under Brett and Matt Corcott and Davor as assistant coach. I'd been coaching in the Winter League myself at Waimakariri United as well. Then I took over the Waimakariri United women as well. So it was starting to happen, and the playing was becoming less and less. And then out of the blue, I got a phone call about going down to Christchurch and meeting with them about the Women's Academy. So I went down to meet Slava, and there was no real talk of me doing anything with the men's first team. Danny Halligan was the coach at the time. He wasn't leaving, so he asked me if I wanted to train. I always take my boots with me because you never know when you might get involved in the game. And he said, "I'll come and have a training session with us." So I come and train with them. Then he asked me to put on a shooting session afterwards. Put on a shooting session. It went really well. Off I went back up to the Wairarapa, and I said to Slava, "Look, I'm not going to do it. This doesn't suit for me, and no disrespect, there was not enough money for me to move because it was just an academy job basically." And then lo and behold, a week later, Danny Halligan decides he's had enough and he's going to leave. And Slava rings me up and said, "Would you come down and do the Women's Academy, be director of football and be the head coach?" And I hadn't coached men's football for a couple of years. I'd been out of it, but I liked the idea of what he was doing at Christchurch, so I took the job. And again, Skippy seems to be in the middle of a lot of the stuff I've done in New Zealand. But when Skippy did his charity football game, I met a good friend of his, Henry Quainu. Everybody calls him Ecor. He was the head coach at Coastal. and we chatted at the bar at his charity night, and we talking, and we'd be like, we had similar ideas around football. And I remember we'd had a few drinks, and we were like, "Cool, imagine us two black coaches causing trouble in the leagues over here. It'd be brilliant, wouldn't it? People probably wouldn't like it." And I said, "Oh, you never know, one day, mate." And that was kind of how it was left. It was just a sort of throwaway comment, really. And then when I was announced with the job, he rang me again within minutes. Said, "Look, he was head coach at Coastal." He said, "Look, I wouldn't leave a head coach's job for anybody else, but if you want me to assist you, I'm in." So I thought about it, and he just bugged the crap out of me. I'm not going to lie. He rang me nearly every day. Have you made a decision? I can help you so much. I can do this. I can do that. And again, same thing that I felt when I first met Skip. I had with him. I just thought, this guy, he wants it so much. He's just going to find a way to make it work. So I agreed to it, and he came in, and I quickly realised how good he was. Like, fantastic coach, great guy. Again, life and soul of the party. Sometimes I had to rein him in, which he always told me to, because off the pitch, he likes to have a good time too. But when he's on it, he's super professional. So I think we've learned a lot from each other over the past couple of years. He's a fantastic coach on the grass, and I've personally learned a lot from him. It's not just the other way around. I think we've kind of moulded into a duo, and I kind of see myself as an old school manager that coaches, whereas I think he's a coach that also manages. So we kind of fit well together. I think we could both do the job individually, but I think we're better together at the moment. And I think that's why we've had a good deal of success over the last 3 seasons. And what I do like is we challenge each other, and it's never just my way. I do have to have the final say as the gaffer, but certainly he challenges me every day. And have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Oh, I don't think that will work. This might work. And what I always like is, if he comes to me with a problem, he's already thought of a solution that might work. And I think, we've had a cracking relationship over the 3 years, and we'll certainly go one more next year, and then it might be a time to go our separate ways, because I do think that he's too good to be an assistant, in my opinion. I think he's ready to go out on his own, and I think if he just tweaks a few little bits here and there, I think he'd go on to be a pro coach.
What happens? Whoops, sorry, bit of a sound. Right, that's gone. Sorry, bit of sound interference. So for you, Paul, what's on the horizon? Any thoughts at this stage, or one season at a time?
Yeah, ultimately I want to win the National League. I've never won the National League. We finished third last year, and that was class. But again, when you're at a club as big as Olympic, we're expected to be in that top 2 in that grand final and try and win it. It's going to be a tough league. I think once we've got taken care of that one way or the other, I'll speak to the club and look at next year. I'm hopeful that they want me to stay. I'd like to stay, so we'll hopefully get that done. It would be nice to be, winning a National League and be on the verge of an O-League, because I've never been involved in an O-League in any way, shape or form. So that's kind of where I want to go. And then after that is when you start thinking, right, what's next maybe? But it could be that, I'm not convinced I want to be a career coach as a pro. Having done it as a footballer, I don't know if I want to go through all of that again, but I'm certainly doing more than I thought I'd ever do as a coach. So I would never say never. If you just said to me, even 5 years ago, you'll be at Wellington Olympic coaching in the National League, I'd have laughed, because I'd kind of decided that wasn't for me. So now I am doing that, and I've been sucked back in. We will see. Hey,
mate, look, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here. We need another hour, really, but we've got another podcast to do. Yeah. So some great stories here. We thank you very much for your time and joining us and giving us some fantastic background into your England career, but also a bit of insight and, behind the scenes in New Zealand and meeting these scallywags too, and what happened there.
No problem at all.
Yeah. And we certainly wish you all the best for the forthcoming National League. Well done on the Chatham Cup, and hopefully get the gig into the O-League.
That'd be nice. We'll be trying.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much. Appreciate it, buddy. Good luck, mate.
Cheers, mate. Catch up. Bye-bye.
Talk Nelson Radio. It's the Talk of Nelson.